Sonic CD is a game that was released on the Sega CD, which doomed it to fail. Most people tend to swear it off, saying it's tedious or boring, while others say that it's a fun and a unique approach to combining speed and exploration. Guess which camp I fall into? Yes, but I am not here to give you a synopsis of this game's history. Most of you may know that Sonic CD has two separate soundtracks, one exclusive to the United States and one for everywhere else. Most everyone will tell you that the soundtrack is great, despite disliking the game itself. The debate on which OST is better is often a short one, with the Japanese soundtrack reigning supreme, most of the time with its heart-pounding 90s style. The US soundtrack tends to lean more on atmospheric music, and yet it's still great. It's a bit more varied, and even houses some bangers that rival even the original Japanese soundtrack. I've been thinking a lot about the US soundtrack lately, and I first want to highlight some of my favorite tracks from the game. I love Collision Chaos and how it sounds like a population was decimated by its own creations, and the area fell to ruin. Wacky Workbench has an actual slapper of a track. All three of the Stardust Speedway tracks are amazing. Even the present version got a remix from Cash Cash and Jun Sonoe. I hope I said that right. Yes, I've kind of been studying each soundtrack and how they do their thing. I should preface this by saying that I have almost no music theory knowledge, so take this as a disclaimer. I want to go through the different songs and see if I can't find a pattern among the tracks. Once I've gone through with all of the analysis, I'm going to do my best to try and make an original piece in the style of the US soundtrack. Let me know if this is something you'd like to see done with the Japanese OST as well. With all that out of the way, you can call me Vin, and welcome to Sonic CD. We'll start with the present tracks. These songs play in the neutral time period where nothing special is going on. By all accounts, these are the official tracks for the zones. The basis, you could say. These tracks tend to be a lot more lax, and that's for a good reason. Nothing special has happened yet in this zone, so there's no reason for the music to go crazy. This is displayed very well in the sense that the chord progressions of these songs are usually used as the main melodies too, albeit they're a little altered. Major examples of this are Collision Chaos and Metallic Madness. Something that I noticed with every one of these songs is that they all have at least one instrument that is repeating the same string of notes throughout the song. Here's Palm Tree Panic. Here's Quartz Quadrant. And here's Stardust Speedway. These are some of the most ear-catching parts of the music, and yet when the melody comes in, they drown out the backing track, creating a really nice synergy that feels very good to listen to. Bass lines are bass lines. They add to the song to make it feel less empty. They follow chord progression and sometimes even determine it. The percussion doesn't seem to like to change too much, and it likes to take it slow. Palm Tree Panic has a very slow drum beat, occurring once every beat, with the fourth beat being more pronounced. Collision Chaos has a more groovy drum beat that pairs well with the random garbage laid around the area. Usually, when the music gets more intense, the drums add another layer on top of the existing beat to exaggerate the rising emotion. But generally, it's the same bass beat throughout this whole song, with added layers to fit the mood. You'd probably expect me to give an example on how the drum beats are constructed, but they are also different in many ways. So I guess that the hi-hats are used on downbeats quite often, and extra emphasis is added on the fourth beat in the measure, but that's not always the case. And this is just basic music stuff in general. That's kind of just how drum beats are put together. The soundtrack has a lot of variety, as stated earlier, so generally the use of a genre-related drum beat would work very well. So that's cool and all, but what the Japanese soundtrack fans love is how funky the Bad Future remixes are. But if you're a fan of those original Japanese B-mix tracks, you're up for some disappointment. Much like the present tracks, the US Bad Futures are a lot more lax. They convey their mood in a much different way that I would say is even more powerful than the Japanese version. Chord progression is altered to be much more foreboding. They give a sense of urgency and horror as to what you've done, sometimes dumbed down to even show that the life that used to be here has been gone for a long time. Or like slow-moving sludge making its way across the rivers. Instrumentation on these chords are also ready to make you feel bad about what you've done. They love using darker sounding instruments, sometimes even using a female choir. One of the most prominent ways that they affect the mood is by taking an electric guitar and strumming harsh chords on it one by one, and letting it slowly fade out, like in Stardust Speedway or Chords Quadrant. Bass lines are much more aggressive, they attack faster, and are more sporadic. But they very much so resemble that of what they used to be. Drums are very similar to bass lines in this aspect, similar to what they used to be, but more aggressive and faster. That strange instrument that keeps repeating the same string of notes over and over through the whole song still remains, however, being completely unaltered most of the time. The only difference with it is often change in instrumentation, but it isn't even done that often. Here, let me show you. Take a listen to the higher pitched instrument playing in Collision Chaos. And here's the Bad Future. I rest my case. It's worth mentioning that the female vocalist that shows up in a lot of these songs as extra flavor has a part in making the Bad Futures feel worse. In the Bad Futures, she does a great job of adding extra despair. In Tidal Tempest, she lets out a long wheeze implying lung problems due to the pollution, and in Wacky Workbench, she shouts along with the beat. It sounds like gibberish at first, until you listen closely and notice that she's saying, "Hey, hey, behind you." Main melodies sometimes change entirely, and sometimes are just changed slightly from the present track. Sometimes changed very little, like in Quartz Quadrant and Metallic Madness, and sometimes it's very different, like in Stardust Speedway and Palm Tree Panic. Can you tell that I really like Stardust Speedway? It's almost better than the Japanese version. Almost. This is how I understand they make a Bad Future. A dark, desolate world with no hope and no future. The Bad Future tracks scream, "What's the point of even trying? Just give up." He's already won. But luckily for us, there's another side to that coin. You hear a lot of people talk about the present and the Bad Future versions of the Japanese soundtrack, but almost never the Good Future tracks. Maybe to them, the Good Future tracks are more forgettable. Where the Bad Future remixes are dark and depressing, the Good Future remixes signify triumph. Some of the US Good Future remixes are just tweaks of the Bad Future tracks, but with more upbeat and happy mood to them. Quartz Quadrant, Wacky Workbench, and Metallic Madness all do this. Outliers do apply though, like Palm Tree Panic. It's loosely based on the Bad Future version, just in a major key, and with much more upbeat instruments and a very energetic lead. Collision Chaos is a more energetic and happy version of the present mix, with some more complicated chord progressions. Tidal Tempest is also based on a more upbeat present version. Stardust Speedway is an exception to all of this. For both of the future tracks, it goes for more original pieces in both. The only thing staying the same being leitmotifs, which is very nice to hear. Did you hear a similarity? That would be what a leitmotif is. The Good Future version is the song that made me realize that the good future is supposed to be triumphant. I mean, just listen to it one more time. I know I just played it, but listen to it again. So now that we know what makes these songs tick, why don't we experiment a bit? Let's make our own Sonic CD inspired song. I was originally just going to make a present version, but that's only a third of the Sonic CD experience, isn't it?